every cloud has its silver lining, and it gives me actually the pleasure and the honor and the opportunity to be here again after I came here and be on stage about 5 years ago in this fantastic convention for the retail sector, and I'll come to that in some concluding points. And the message that I want to bring here to you is a message of hope, is a message of pride, and a message of also of caution and determination. The first message is a message of hope. When I looked at the size and the results of the Czech retail market, I see tremendous growth. There's a number of even markets that function very well, like Germany or the United States, are looking probably with a lot of envy at growth of 6, 7, and if I understand my numbers correct, is that in 2017 a growth of 10% of the retail market. So I think it is also a sign of the development, the sign of also the evolution of the consumer in the Czech Republic, in the Czech market, that is becoming more affluent and benefits from the new innovations that the retail sector are bringing forward. And there's also a certain element of hope in the European Union and in what Europe can bring. And I think in this year, where we will have elections, and the months of May, I think this is also quite an important message to be heard and to be reminded of the opportunity that European Union are bringing towards the Czech Republic and towards the Czech consumers, and I'll come also on that a bit later. My second message is a message of pride, and the pride about the retail sector. We in EuroCommerce, the whole sector is 5.4 million enterprises. That's 1 in 4 companies that is a retailer. And that goes from very small national retailers, small co-op retailers, to national champions, to also international companies that are competing on a global scale. And if you look at the top 10 retailers, 4 or 5 are really European companies. And this is something that we should be very proud in an age where we are competing with American giants, with Chinese giants. And I think competition is a very good thing, but I think it's also quite important that we see the benefits of European champions in that regard as well. So these companies employ 29 million people. That's 1 in 7 jobs. 1 in 7 people work for retailers. And if you look specifically at this part of Europe, in Central and Eastern Europe, what we have seen is that retailers over the last 25 years and the history that you've brought in this very nice timeline, I think it's probably created about 500,000 jobs, 400,000 jobs, and we invested probably in the range of 100 billion euros over that period in creating innovations and bringing this innovation to the consumers. So, and also I think in developing local supply chain. This is also something, and sometimes it's a very difficult political discussions, but the retailers that have come, that have developed here, but that have also come from Western Europe, have also actually developed local supply chain, have developed partnerships with farming communities, have helped the farmers to develop their own products. And when you look in supermarkets today, you see 70–80% of Czech products. I mean, the famous Kofola, but there may be others that I think you can see here. And this is very important, but it's also important that we're also open to other products. And I think that, for me, having lived in Belgium, we see how the modern retailers also have brought products from Italy, from England, also from the other parts of the world. And I think that is actually quite important that we are quite open for that. And when consumer wants to have local products or wants to have products from abroad, the retailers, will be there, to bring these products. So I think that is quite important. Where we have a little more problem is when this becomes sort of mandatory and that you have fixed percentage of products and you bring rigidity in the market. And this is actually where I come with my message of, caution and at the same time determination. The retailer is undergoing tremendous changes as we see right now, and the changes are about the digitalization of the economy, tremendous global competition as we heard it, the changing consumer behavior. And if you want to hear it, I really recommend that you stay on for Steven van Belleghem, a little later on. I've had the opportunity to listen to him twice, and it's actually a fantastic story in terms of how the consumer is changing, how the technology is changing with him. And it's a bit of, is the consumer changing first, or is the technology bringing more opportunities for the consumer? I think it's a bit of both. So that is actually, quite important. But as a result of that, in order to stay relevant, retailers have to continue to invest. We'll hear later on from Amazon and from Ralph Kleber. I thought yesterday, actually, reading something that Amazon invests about 10–15% of its turnover back in R&D, back in investment. I mean, these are percentages that you're used to see in the IT industry, in the car industry, in the pharmaceutical industry, but less so probably in the retail industry. And I think that is quite important. And the other relevance, the incumbents, the brick and mortars, have to continue to invest in stay relevant, making the stores relevant, going to omni-channel, retailers. And as a result of that, one of the key things that is very important is that they need to have support in order to do this investment. And the least they need in that regard is to have legislation that hamper those investments. The European Commission last year, about a year ago in April, came out with a very important communication to call Retail in the 21st Century, Fit for the 21st Century. I really recommend you have a look at that, because it was not a legislative proposal, but it was a communication where the Commission looked at a number of specific issues. And they came to the conclusion, also looking at OECD criteria, that actually the more you have regulation and the more you have excessive regulation, the less competitive the retail sector is. That does not mean that regulation is not necessary. In some instances it is, but it has identified that the number of restrictions can actually have an anti-competitive effect on the retail sector. And unfortunately what we see in this part of Europe is quite a bit of this legislation. Restrictions on what you can sell, restriction on opening hours, restrictions on spaces. You see also some excessive controls that you see on food safety, on some issues like that that are disproportionate. You see a number of taxes, discriminatory taxes. I'm glad that the minister actually referred indeed to the Slovak tax, because this is something that we are, and here comes my part on determination. We are determined to really fight against those kind of taxes that are discriminatory. 2.5% imposed on a limited number of retail companies on your turnover. When you know that the retailers typically operate between 1% and 3% of a profit margin, when you impose a 2.5% taxes, that is basically the difference between you having your numbers in the black or in the red, or in the what's making a profit and a loss. And if you can't make a profit, it's very difficult to justify investments, to your headquarters. So this is the kind of measures that are actually detrimental. And yes, it is important to balance your budget as a government. We understand that. But we really are calling for, for a level playing field. We've seen indeed difficulties in Significant Market Power Act. This is a legislation that in Europe is seen as really one of the most, I think, restrictive acts. We've seen actually movements also in other countries, Romania, where you impose a certain percentage of local food. And as I said before, I'm sure retailers want to actually stock products from Czech manufacturers, from Czech farmers, but at the end of the day, we have to make sure that also the Czech agriculture can produce such enough food for the country. And I think this is kind of issues like that. There is also benefits in the single market of looking at, in a broader sense, and looking at the benefits of getting products also from outside Europe, when people can produce it more competitively or provide some different choices and diversity. And at the end of the day, the ones who benefit is the consumers. And this is also something that I think we have seen. And Europe also, unfortunately, has done quite a number of negative development as well. We have seen the directive on unfair trading practices that has been developed, which will bring more rigidity in the relationship, prevent a number of creativity in market freedom between the various operators. So these are, I think, issues that we see also some with a bit of concerns. And another aspect that actually the European Commission in its report has identified is also the market fragmentation also by some of the suppliers. This is also one of the reasons why we have this so-called dual quality foods. I think that some companies have been used to provide recipes that are specific in relation to the countries. The European Commission is dealing with that, with providing scientific methods to actually deal with that. Your own Commissioner, Vera Jourova, who's doing an excellent job in Brussels, is trying to bring some common sense and some rationality in a debate that sometimes has become irrational. I think that is quite important, for the importance of the consumers. So, in conclusion, what I wanted to do in the 10 minutes that I was given to try to bring this message of hope, message of pride about the sector, message of caution and determination on the effect of regulation. And actually looking back, I think, on this timeline, I read yesterday The Economist is having one of the titles of its articles this week is about 15 years ago Facebook was created, Last night we heard that, Amazon was created 23 years ago, but 15 years ago, 15 years ago, and this is one thing that was actually I missed in the timeline. You talked about a lot of retailers coming in, 2002 introduction of the euro, but in 2004, the Czech Republic joined the European Union. So perhaps if you can do an edit, you might want to add that, because it's a quite significant issue. So 15 years ago, and there's been a lot of benefits from that. And in fact, 25 years ago, this convention was created, even 10 years before the Czech Republic joined the European Union, by some visionary sectors, by Blue Partners and others that saw, actually, after the wall came down in the late 80s, and we saw actually the development in the early 90s, where modern developments and the consumers and the direction of travel. And it is actually a credit to you as a retail sector here in the Czech Republic and Slovakia, and the partners, to organizing, bring together the sectors with all the innovations, picking up innovations, from the other sector and from elsewhere as well. And I think that is a testimony to the dynamism and the energy that is in the sector. And it is with that actually message of optimism that I want to, wish you well and success for the next 25 years, and will continued support from our part in EuroCommerce. Thank you.